Hello.
Hi, Darren sir. Good evening.
Hi, how are you? I
Yeah, I'm
don't
very
see
good.
anyone.
Can you see me?
No. I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Okay, 1 minute. I think we'll cancel the screen share so that we can see the videos.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. So I think we'll start with a small presentation about RVS. Very good evening, friends who have joined with us for the FOA Architecture 2025 series. And we are here to interact with someone who's very renowned in the field of architecture, Darrell Keister. And this entire Future of Architecture is an organization, is a complete event that has been organized by RVS Chennai Padmavati School of Architecture and TASA, the Alternative Schools of Architecture. I would like to make a small presentation about RVS Chennai and TASA before we start with the event for a few minutes.
Super.
Yeah. So,
I
RVS
think
Chennai Padmavati School of
for
Architecture
me, the
is some.
screen is blank. So how many people are on the call, I guess?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are registered for the event, and we are having people joining us right now. I think in 5 minutes we'll have a lot more people joining us. So
Okay.
by that time, I think I would get my presentation also in place, and we can start off with the Q&A directly because we've received a lot of questions from many young architects. So RVS Chennai Padmavati School of Architecture, also known as TASA, the Alternative School of Architecture, is an architecture institution which works towards developing unique methodologies to teach architecture, and we've been striving to do that day in and day out. So we have been traveling across the entire country with our students and our faculties, learning from across the entire nation. In different parts of the country, we've always collaborated and taken steps forward to make the educational experience quite exorbitant and very exquisite for our students. We've also moved very international in taking different initiatives for our students to travel abroad as well. RVS Educational Trust was started by our chairman, Dr. KV Kuppusamy Ayya, and we have our young and dynamic trustees who've been part of the organization. And the director of the school, who's actually a non-architect, but the vision and the mission of RVS and TASA is from someone called Stephen, who's our director, and we call him the architect of this entire institution as well. And as we move forward, RVS has always been striving to do something more and better in terms of architectural education. And we created our own style of educational system, which works on 5 different ways. So we embodied these 5 principles in a very strong manner to be able to bring it into the architectural education. The first one being hands-on, where our students are involved in real-time construction projects on different parts of the country on different materials. There are projects where they've worked on brick, they worked on libraries, they worked on metal pavilions, they worked on extremely sustainable construction projects in Chikmagalur. And every time they build it, students have been part of these projects on real site construction. This is a recent project that they did in Nagpur, where they built a geodesic dome. And they were a part of this entire construction process. So they go to the site, they work as actual makers of these project creators rather than just be designers. And such projects have always been the backbone of how our students are being taught and trained to take things forward in the entire architectural scenario. And we do these projects as a regular basis in part of our entire academic progress. So every time a student enters into RVS, he's going to definitely build at least one project, and he's going to see the entire way in how a project is being envisioned and taken forward. And we also have a lot of opportunities for our students to not only build projects, but also design real-time projects, which we work with the state government of Tamil Nadu in coming up with unique opportunities and solutions that are very crucial for any architecture student to take this forward. One of the second characters that we focus a lot is called being technology ready. Now, technology ready is something that is very crucial for any architecture student to work on. So being technologically advanced and being technologically ready is essential for any architect. So under technology ready, we have something that we've created called the AAD, which is the Academy of Advanced Architecture and Design, which is a unique academy that we have created for our students to know about the new trends in the market and how softwares can play a crucial role. And we have created something called a diploma in BIM, which is the first of its kind program that we have created for professional architects to be part of this entire program. I think there is a problem with the screen share. Can you share the presentation again?
Yeah, all I have is I get a blank. I can see some dialogue boxes at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, just a minute. Can you go to the next page? Fast. Yeah. So we've created an exclusive diploma in BIM program, which is the first of its kind program where our students are involved in a 2-year intense training of building information and modeling. And through AAD, we believe that we want to take the students into the future by collaborating with Forge Design Studio in Mumbai, which is one of the largest fabrication labs in the country. And we intend to do projects that are very, very technologically driven, that uses Rhino and Grasshopper as its main component. And this is one of the real pavilions that we've built in our campus, which is actually built completely by our students. The third character we strongly embody is called Collaborate, which we believe is an essential tool for any architect to be successful. And Vertical Studio is the pillar of strength for us educational system, because in Vertical Studio, we collaborate with various institutions and understand their strengths, and we work with them on different projects across the entire country. So this way, a student of architecture gets to get exposed to students and faculties of different institutions in a way that they can collaborate and work together. So these are some of the projects that we've been working on. The Chandigarh Metro is one of the projects that we are working on. We also worked with UTM Malaysia as an international studio project. And we work with various institutions on taking unique projects across the entire country. And we tried to generate such an interesting exercise for the students through the academic progress. And one of the most important things that we've developed is called the Travel Studio, where students are involved in intense travel in their first semester, and how they work and how they develop their first semester architecture and basic design studio projects from the travel itself. And one of the other things that we focus a lot is for students to interact with architects through online and offline mode. So we collaborate a lot with various architects and make sure our students visit these architecture offices to understand how they operate and to always have a larger aspiration for them. The fourth character is called multitasking, where students are involved in different allied fields of architecture as well, like climate responsive architecture. They work on disaster resilience, which are not the core subjects in architecture, but they travel and learn and work on these allied fields as well. The fifth character is called Being in Trend, where they are open to IGBC exercises. They are given free classes. We conduct workshops, and we also introduce them to various industrial partners through interactions that they have. We also introduce students to a lot of softwares because we think it's essential for the students to be successful by learning these softwares as part of their curriculum. The most important thing that we have generated in the last few years is something called TASA, which is the reason why this event is happening, is the Alternative Schools of Architecture. And in Alternative Schools of Architecture, we have around 22 institutions all over India who have been part of our academy, who are working with us, with 8,000 students who are part of this entire association. And we intend to bring together firms, institutions, and industries under the wing of TASA to conduct students, faculty, and professional development programs. So we have conducted various teachers training programs, various professional training programs across the entire country, which has always been something important for the fraternity to grow. And we also conducted one of the largest Unnati Ratna Lifetime Achievement Award, which was to honor architect Raj Reval sir in Chennai, which was a grand event. We conducted the Student of the Year Thesis Awards. And coming back to FOA, Future of Architecture, is something that we've been doing from the time COVID started. So we have always interacted with professional architects to share their views through online and offline modes. And we started off, we've done many series. Last year, we also went ahead to make it offline. So we had architect Chitra Vishwanathan, architect Vilas Avchak, and ended up doing an interesting exhibition of the works of architect Sanjay Mohe sir in Chennai. And we have created an exclusive portal called ArcJobs, which is a portal where you can register and understand and identify various job opportunities that you have on a national platform. And this year, we have also launched our own newsletter, which carries information about the field of architecture and urban issues of the entire country being put together under one platform. And today, we have with us architect Daryl Custer, who's someone who's been very, receptive of the idea when I pitched it to him about coming together. I would like to give a small brief, and I take the distinct pleasure in introducing this visionary leader who's in the world of architecture and design, Mr. Daryl Custer. He's the managing director of the design division of KEO International Consultants, one of the largest firms and the #1 firm in UAE and one of the largest private firms in the country.
KEO International Consultant is a prominent and a global consulting firm with a strong presence in the Middle East, and they provide comprehensive services in architectural design, urban planning, and infrastructure engineering. Uh, Architect Daryl brings about 34 years of unparalleled experience to the forefront of innovative design, and his expertise spans across diverse range of sectors, including urban mixed-use development, healthcare, retail, commercial projects, and keen understanding on development, design, and operation. We invite you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar and gracing us with your presence.
So thank you, Daryl. I think if we start reading about what Daryl and KEO has been doing, the list is quite long. So we have a very short time. We've taken a 1 hour appointment with Daryl to do this because he's a very, very busy man. And I would like to directly plunge into the questions that we've collected over the last few days. And there has been a lot of questions that's come to us continuously about what to do and how to take things forward. And since being an international practice, so Daryl, would you like to share a few words about this so that we can start with the Q&A?
Yeah, well, I guess for starters, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm kind of blushing here. It's a bit humbling, but anyway, yeah, no, thanks. I think you said it all pretty well. We've got a pretty successful practice running here in the Middle East, across the region. We're doing work in Europe now and in Africa, and we still do a little bit of work in Asia as well. But anyway, yeah, maybe I'll just hand it over to you, and if everybody wants to just fire away with questions or however you want to do it.
Yes. So one of the first questions one of the questions that was repeated most by many of the students and architects who went through us with the form is this is another question that we wanted to take forward. I will speak out the question. So the question that I had written down was, I think I'd also emailed you, what is the role of architects going to be in the future, considering the expanse of AI and other technologies? This question came to us through various methodologies, I would say various contexts and various phrases. So there were a lot of students who wrote to us asking about whether architects would be replaced or what would architects learn. And there were also senior architects who came to us with the question whether what I studied is currently not, in the current trend. Will it be useful? Will it not be useful? So this is a doubt that people have in their mind. So we've just put it quite plain and simple. What will be the role of architects in the future, given the rapid growth of AI and the other technologies?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. A lot of it, I think, has to do with how you think of an architect. Most people, by its definition, it's somebody who works in the building design space, designing buildings. But in my view, an architect in an architect's role is to come forward with ideas to improve the human condition, right? So it's not just the buildings; it's about the spaces in between. It's about how urban environments work cohesively. It's about how people live their lives and get from point A to point B. And so regardless of how those ideas come forward, I think you always need architects and people who can think in those terms to come forward with ideas. So yeah, it is fair to say that the first advent was AutoCAD and sort of using digital platforms to develop drawings, which was in 2D AutoCAD. Now the second generation was BIM 3D Revit modeling, and now the new generation is enabling generative AI and other computer platforms that can then take those ideas and start to do them on their own. So I think what it really does is it brings more ideas forward more quickly. So I do think that focusing on the vision behind these things and focusing on the front end and how these things come together is always going to be needed, whether it's an AI generated illustration or a machine driven thought process.
And there's also this fear that, many senior architects, or even I would say senior practitioners, have shared with us about how technology is not, something that can be productive. It is ruining the design language. It's taking away the emotions from, the space, or, the volumetric. While there are the young architects who are very strongly objecting to that idea that, technology is essential and crucial for us to be successful in the future. So what do you say about that? Whom do you side with here?
Well, I don't think there's a side. I think there's just different ways of looking at it. And I would argue that the more technology you have, the better of solutions you can come forward with. The other thing to think about is that while we're having advances in how buildings are designed and articulated, we're also having advances in how they're built and the complexity behind them. So if you look at a building, say 300 years ago, that was, it was bricks and it was mortar and it was concrete. And then, at the turn of the last century during the Industrial Revolution, you started to have plumbing and wiring and electronically, things brought into these buildings. And now, buildings are going to become smart. So, in the future, I'll take, the latest Blade Runner movie as an example, so having a building that's connected to a human with an interface, with an avatar, your apartment has a personality. It's got an avatar that follows you around. It leaves with you. It knows what you need when you come in. So that's sort of the next generation of where these things are going. Buildings that will automatically be able to tint their windows or open the windows on demand. Those are the things that are coming, and those are things that have a whole new layer of complexity. And you sort of need more technology to be able to bring those things forward. I mean, the analogy I would use is that I think if the buildings of the past were static buildings that were connected to Earth, I think they still will be static in the sense that they're connected and they're built in a fixed location, but maybe they'll be designed more like a car or or a piece of machinery that's fully automated and smart and has its own brain, right?
I think the analogy made it very clear for all of us to how to look at buildings. So thank you, Daryl.
So we have another question, which is a little bit more specific. So one person asks, please share the latest or the most advanced technology you have utilized in your recent projects.
Well, so we do a lot of work with Autodesk because they're a huge provider for the Revit models we build. They have a new program called Forma, which is sort of a front-end design platform that enables us to more quickly get to our Revit models. We also use a program called Rhino, but there's a handful of different softwares out there that we use. But irregardless of that, I would say generative design is where we're going, and it kind of fits into everything I'm talking about, where you put in the parameters and you put in the requirements and you put in, it's sort of a data-driven design process, and then the machine helps us do generative design. So let's say you have a building or a cluster of buildings, and if you have a priority on a view, let's say here in Dubai, you're doing a residential cluster that's next to the Burj Khalifa, and you want 80% of your buildings to have a view towards the Burj. And maybe you also want to reduce heat gain as much as possible by, and maybe you also want to, so by that, you want to limit the amount of glass that's directly facing the sun. When you put those parameters in and then you lay out the criteria of the property and the massing that you have, generative design will give you 1,000 examples or 1,000 different ways to look at it with resulting data and data points that we then as designers can use. So that's what we're doing on most of our projects now. I'll give you another example. I'll give you two other examples. One is a high-rise tower we're designing in Jeddah, where it's a round shaped building. It's kind of oblong. It's got a round top. There's no, it's not orthogonally based at all. There's no flat planes on it. But to design the project and make it so it's constructible, we did do it with flat panes, and we used generative design. We came up with 8 panel sizes and 8 panel types, and then used generative design to help us formulate what the facade would look like in a manner that sort of gave us the look we wanted, but by limiting the panel sizes to only 8, so it's more constructible and more easy to fabricate and deliver on site. And I can tell you, 20 years ago, a process like that would have taken years because we wouldn't have had the technology available to sort of quickly iterate those ideas. One of the other technologies we're using right now too is modular. And I know modular for some people has a bad connotation because it implies, Legos or a kit of parts or some regularity. But the reality is, if you can modulate things that are repetitive and then focus on the unique things that you want to do, it's a good way to deliver a project more affordably to our clients and more quickly. We are doing that in Saudi on some of our staff accommodation projects and some of our residential projects. We have a hotel coming where we probably will do that too, where the hotel rooms will be built off-site. They'll be delivered as a box and put together as a kit of parts and then facaded up to look like it's built in situ.
Thanks. Thank you, Daryl. Now, coming to something that, it was more of a question that even was something that most young architects and senior architects would like to share with, as a experience. So would you be willing to discuss the challenges that you faced while working with clients and the strategies of what you employed to successfully overcome them? So why I'm asking such a long question is because there are various kind of issues that when we work with clients, and specifically for you, there are very large clients, I believe. So what would be the challenges that you'd face generally, and how do you work on this? How do you come up with solutions, or what is the idea that you take forward?
Yeah. So a lot of it depends on the kind of clients you work for and the kind of projects you work on. For me and for my group and in my career, it's almost always exclusively been with commercial developers. So I made the decision a long time ago to work in the commercial space for developers. So it's essentially construction for profit, whether that's building a hotel, an office tower, a residential building. These are all assets, right? So with clients like that and with the personality, because what's driving those projects is a return on investment, the key issue with all of our clients is cost and schedule. So on the cost side, what we try to do is, one, learn from mistakes, but sort of reiterate things that are repetitive. So what I was talking about with modularity, that sort of speaks to what I'm talking about. So, when you're designing a building, try to regulate the things that are repetitive so that you can sort of put them aside and then focus on the special and unique things so that you're delivering something special and unique, but maybe that's just on certain parts of it. And then the schedule is the same thing. I think we try to come up with more creative ways to fast track projects. In a lot of cases, we'll come up with unique delivery models where you can sort of roll out a project where you figure out the base, you figure out the plan, and then they can get started on, with earthwork, roads, get going on those things. And then the foundations and the piles and the column grid, can be constructed while we're still designing the top and the facade. So I know in a perfect world, you would design a building start to finish and then you would issue it as one pack. But what we're finding is sort of, a fast track delivery model where you have to figure it out in a way, but then be able to deliver it in pieces so that they can get to construction more quickly. But it's an ongoing challenge. I would say cost and schedule. For anybody who's going to get into this business and work for commercial developers, that's the game, is cost and schedule.
So, in continuity to the same thing, like you said, you've already answered this question, but I would like to go a little more into this. What is the most key aspect while you're managing large scale projects? You've already mentioned that time and cost are the two integral parts of any project needs to be focused on. So, what is most effective design process that you take care in such large projects?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. If you're referring to the result, it's about having a clear vision and then breaking that down into component parts. If you're talking about the mechanics of delivering it, I would say it's a similar answer. Is you've got to be able to put a team together. Large projects require large teams, and large teams only work together if there's very clear roles and responsibilities and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. It's like if you use a sports analogy, everybody on the football pitch has to know what everybody else's position is, and the goalie has to know his role and the forward has to know his role. And it's the same approach. You have to have people who can role play, work together, but then also work independently. And you start with a vision, and then that breaks down into component parts, and then it comes together as a vision in the end.
But you've always, focused on trying to bring the project down to a smaller scale. But what is the differences that you see in the large and the small scale projects? Because time, how we handle large scale projects, like you said, we in a perfect world, we would want to design the entire building and probably then start work on site, but that doesn't really happen even in smaller scale projects. So is there a large difference in the way you handle large and small scale projects, or the design process or the construction process is somewhat similar in both avenues?
I would say it's similar, but there's a difference in scalability. I think, like I said, on large projects, I think it's about figuring out the overall vision and the component parts, and then being able to break it down into, I don't want to say an assembly line, but breaking it down into smaller parts. In a smaller project, it's maybe less critical. I think it can be visualized. As one, and it's, I guess, a little more simplified, not as complex, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how crucial is marketing for an architect, sir?
Well, it depends on the kind of architecture and the kind of projects you do. I would say it's fairly important, because if people don't know you and they don't know what you're doing, you have to have your name out there to some degree. But a lot of that has to do with what type of firm that you are. There's Starchitects. There are branded firms like Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry, Norm Foster. Those types of firms generally are global brands, and their work essentially markets themselves, right? And then there are large corporate firms like KEO, like Gensler, branded firms like that have a corporate identity, where it's more about having that brand out there. And then there are smaller private firms, which are usually named firms, or they're smaller boutique firms, which, again, they're known for the work they have, but I would say it's even more critical to have a marketing effort, so that people know who you are. But I think it is important. I mean, it's important to tell your story, not just to represent the work that you've done, but so that you can sort of talk about what you're doing in the future.
Yeah, and just coming to the same thing about marketing, there is always this big dilemma between architects about how they should project their work. Because currently, social media has been something that's very key, and that has been something that has changed the way people look at the world, people look at architecture, and the amount of architectural advertisements or marketings that you see online is very, very, very less compared to all the other fields, even other fields of design. So do you think that we should promote or we should project architecture more in the social world to get more awareness, to get more credibility for the work we do?
Yes, if it supports the improvement of the human condition and the value of communities, and it improves people's way of life. I mean, it's kind of like if it's about enhancing community, then yes. But I would argue that in a way, it is more prominent than you realize. Like right now, think of any city, think of any location in the world, and I would bet that the first thing that you think of is a building. When people think of Dubai, they think of the Burj Khalifa or the Museum of the Future. When they think of Paris, they think of the Eiffel Tower. When people, and on and on and on. So I would say, in some sense, architecture already is part of the sort of, the lexicon for how humans identify space. So I think if we're talking about it in those terms, then I think it's very important because it's how people relate.
Oh yeah, very, very well said that, every nation, every city identity is the architecture of it. But I think people don't understand that it is the architect who's been someone who's, envisioned the entire process. That is, I think, where the gap is. So thank you for that.
So we have a very honest question, which I think one of the students have asked. What skills do you believe are essential for becoming an effective and a successful architect?
Well, I would say, granted, I'll admit I'm biased. Obviously, I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm a little biased here. But I would say that architecture as a profession is probably one of the broadest career paths that somebody can get into because it touches on so many different things. And so in a lot of ways, I guess what I'm saying is that there are a lot of different types of architects. So, when you're in school and in academia, most students are focusing on learning the craft of designing buildings. But the reality is when you get out into the business world, there are people, and it depends on the size and scale and the firm you're in, but there are architects who spend all their time doing business development, marketing, meeting with clients. There are some who focus on graphic design. There are some who focus on urban planning. I mean, there's just so many different things to do in our business. There are some who like to work with engineers and figure out column grids and figure out column spacing. So I think the first thing I would say is figure out what you're interested in, figure out what you're good at, and figure out how to match the two. Because it's like I said, it's a very complex field, and you may end up becoming a design leader. You may end up becoming a project manager who works with clients, who negotiates contracts and fees and invoices. You may be somebody who's a technician who likes to write specifications. So I think that, the way I view it is, and when I usually talk to people fresh out of school, is spend the first 4 years just trying everything and looking at all the different things and trying different ideas and exploring different activities and looking at, where are the areas that you excel at, what are of those things, what are the things that really interested you? And of those things, what were you inherently good at? And then you spend the next 4 to 5 years trying to match those two. And then you spend the next 5 years trying to refine that. And then you're trying to, and then once you get into this realm where you have a sense of, what kind of practitioner you want to be, then you focus on going from being good to great. And that's really when it really gets exciting, when you become really great at something, and then you can participate in a larger team, like I described earlier on maybe larger projects. That's when it all starts to come together.
Thank you, Daryl. In continuation to something, what these young architects have always put forward to us, something that even I have in my own mind is, how do you, best way to structure a company, towards growth? What is the point that I should focus a lot on? How do you think a young architect, depending on whatever kind of architect they want to be, and they want to start their own firm, where are the pain points that you think they should focus on? And how do you think, or what kind of structure do you think is essential for a company for growth? Because most of the times the architects who have their startups, there is no structure to it. It is quite, it's always looks quite chaotic, and it's always random, and they have their hands in everything. So what would be your suggestion with your experience as the best way to structure the company for growth?
Well, I think, similar to how I described doing a successful project, I think if you think about it a little more loosely, just say, okay, well, what's the vision? I mean, the first thing you have to think about is, what is it that I want to accomplish as an architect? What's my vision? And then what's the value? What's the value proposition? Why would somebody hire me? What is it that I do that has them wanting to hire me to do something for them? And then once you've got those two answers, then it's like, okay, well, what do I need to deliver on that promise? And whether that's, human capital, whether that's, I need this person, I need this person, I need this, or, then, once you know that, then you start to fill in those blanks. And, I would say, when you start small, it's maybe you're doing everything. And then as time goes on, you sort of focus on the things you need to do, and you start delegating out the things that somebody else can help you with. And then it grows from there, and one person leads to two, which leads to five, which leads to 10. And that's how you grow a firm.
So is there any personal experience of you in your career where you worked in a small firm, had a very small team, and done something on your own? Is there an experience like that?
Yeah. Before I left the US, I was working in a smaller shop in Seattle. We had about 15 people. And that's how it started. It was just a couple of us. And we sat down and figured out what our vision was, which is we wanted to be a local, small, urban mixed-use firm doing urban mixed-use projects for commercial developers. And, we had a few clients and a few projects, and we started hiring people. And, you sort of create a plan and say, okay, in the next 10 years, we want to have this roster, this head count, and you hire one person, and then the next, and the next, and the next,
And if you're hiring for KEO currently, what would be the skill set that you're looking for in young architects? Just, a question that I think I would want to know. What is it that you're looking for in young architects to be part of your team?
Digital design, people who can work in a digital space, Revit, people who can, work and think in 3D modeling, doing, iterative design, generative design.
Okay, so that would be the key factor that you're looking for in young entrepreneurs and young architects.
Yes.
To be quite efficient in the digital world. And Revit, I think many students who wanted to know have got their answer of how and what is required to apply in KEO.
So actually, we had a question that is, what challenges did you encounter when you were bringing Zaha Hadid architect design to reality?
Well, that was actually, I wasn't personally involved in that. That was done in Doha. It was done with our supervision team. The issue there is, attention to detail. So getting the right fabricators and getting the right people on site who can get the project built and delivered and permitted. As you probably all are aware of, Zaha Hadid projects are usually just inherently complex. There's no orthogonal shapes. It's all, curvilinear. There's a lot of different things going on. So getting all that to come together in real terms, getting the steel and the panel, all the panels to come together. And, it's all about the details and being able to sort of put that, not just the details, having good detailing, but having it be constructible. And then having people who can actually do it. That's probably the key challenge. And the time. So, I talked about schedule before, but those stadiums all had to be built, to be ahead of the FIFA games. So yeah, it's a challenge.
So do you happen to have a team called the supervision team, or is it just something that you have tagged your team as?
No, we have a division in KEO that's a PM, project management supervision. It's a separate group that we put on projects during construction. Yeah, it's a whole
Okay.
separate thing.
Okay. So as an architect, you're looking at projects that has been designed by other architects, and when you're bringing it to life, do you have that, there's always this nudge in you that, you would want to design it, but you're working on another person's design. How do you handle that situation? Because you're bringing that to life, definitely, but the vision is from someone else. But as an architect, you've chosen to do that phase in developing the project. So how is that transition for you?
Well, I would say our focus is relationships. So we don't, we look at the clients as business relationships and business partners. So sometimes they will ask us to deliver a project that's designed by somebody else. And then a lot of times we're hired to design the project and deliver it. My preference is the latter because we don't have an issue, developing somebody else's design, and we have a very large engineering team. So, we do a number of projects like that. In the Red Sea right now, as an example, we're delivering a bunch of hotel projects that were designed by Norm Foster, and it's okay. It's about if we did it because we wanted the relationship with Red Sea. But like I said, my preference is when we design our own projects and see them all the way through, because what's happening now, because of with generative design and the way things are moving, we're iterating projects electronically from day one. And so when we build those models, if we can build the model and then you make it more complex as time goes on, it's much easier than, say, taking somebody else's model or, at the beginning of schematic design. If we get some model from like Zaha Hadid or Norm Foster or one of these other firms, sometimes we take their work and then we layer over it and rebuild the model for our own purposes so that it's built to suit, which, we don't have a problem doing it, but it takes time and it costs money. So our preference is to do our own projects. Plus, I will admit, there's a little more pride. I think our teams feel better when they're working on the projects that they've envisioned.
Okay, so we also have a few random questions that we have coming through with us.
So there's a person who has asked us, with Dubai rapidly evolving towards its 2040 urban master plan, what key principles should designers prioritize to ensure mixed-use developments remain both sustainable and adaptable to changing urban needs?
I would focus on the usability and the livability. I know a lot of people, especially in Dubai, a lot of the projects, it's about the big, the big bold move or the big, statement. But, having projects that are usable and support lifestyles, I think is the most. And the model, really going to a mixed use model where it's getting hotter, traffic's getting worse. So, if you're going to develop and design environments where people can live, work, and play in a more meaningful way, that's a good thing in my mind.
Okay, I think that's a important aspect that I think you've put forward, which is not just for Dubai, but for any place for that matter, understanding principles. And KEO has also been very sustainable in its approach to many of its projects. So would you give a small brief about the sustainable aspects that you look into? Because you're working in a country where there's a lot of use of glass, there's also a lot of use of metal, and also the climate is quite harsh. So what are the principles in which you focus on bringing sustainability as a key element into your architecture projects?
Well, I would say, the most important part of it is harder to discern, but it's about the planning, doing, projects that minimize the amount of, car traffic. Now, some of that is you can't avoid, but like I said, same thing, making community spaces that are walkable and livable. but we are, sourcing materials locally. So, we do try to use material palettes that are reasonable and, you know, not getting all the stone from Italy is a good start. Not that I have anything against Italian stone. It's beautiful and we love it, but then it's got to be cut in a quarry and shipped across the water. So, using local materials. One of the things that we're doing now with our mechanical electrical team is finding ways to reduce water consumption. So, using fixtures and appliances that are more use water in a smarter way. We're also starting to do more solar farms. We just bid on a project in Doha actually to convert a project that has a lot of rooftops into solar farms. So I think we're starting to use more of that kind of thinking in our projects, and we're finally at a point where our clients are asking for it. So that's a good thing. So we'll be doing more of that as time goes on.
So this is a question I think even I have. What's your most challenging project till date, and why so?
Oof. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of challenge. I think from a business point of view, I would say the most challenging ones are when you have clients who, I don't want to say have unrealistic expectations, but have expectations that are very hard, which in the Middle East seems to be more often than you'd like. I would say some of these projects that we have that are out on the outer edges in Saudi Arabia are proving to be very difficult because they're hard to get to. It's hard to get materials to them. They're very remote. So there's literally building communities in what was desert 5 years ago. We have a number of those, and it's a bit of a struggle, to get the materials to get the building drawn up and designed, and they make it so that it can actually be constructed to look like what we want. I think that's probably the biggest gap. Dubai, I think, is probably went through that about 30 years ago, but I think it's past that now. It's obviously a very well established urban environment. Abu Dhabi as well, and Riyadh as well. But these projects that we have that are out on the edges, they're a bit challenging.
And then I would like you to let us know what is your favorite project that you worked on in the recent years, something that you really enjoyed or liked the process, because as you design and execute the projects, which would be something that you'd say is your favorite or the one that you like the most? There'll definitely be something like that.
Yeah, I would say the one I'm most happy with is the one I referred to earlier in this conversation. It's called UView Mixed Use Tower. It's in Jeddah on the Corniche. It's a vertically stacked mixed use project that is very unique for Saudi Arabia for a number of reasons. Probably the biggest one is the mix of the project is, it's similar to the kinds of projects I used to work on in Asia, where it's, it's a vertical city in a sense. You've got a retail podium with shopping and restaurants and food and beverage down on the ground and the lower 3 or 4 floors. And then you've got hotel, service department, for sale residential, and an office space, all stacked vertically in a tower. And then you've also got the building is shaped like a Y. It has 3 wings with a common core. So it's essentially 3 buildings that are sort of glued together in a sense. And it's a very exciting project. I think we're finishing schematic design right now. We'll start DD soon, and that'll go to tender and probably start construction hopefully within this year. The technology we used to design it and iterate it was all using generative design. So very proud of it. I'm sure you'll see it in the news as time goes on.
Generally, what is the time frame for the schematic design process? Like, for a project of the scales that you're generally handling, what will be the time that you take for you to come up with a schematic design and taking it to the client?
Well, It depends on the size and scale, but say a mid-sized project, maybe it's 2 towers. Usually there's a pre-concept phase, which usually runs a couple of weeks. And in that phase, that's where we'll just do some basic blocking and say, and that's really where you're figuring out the business case. So, if it's apartments, how many apartments, how many hotel rooms, how many this, how many that. And, that's where you basically figure out what the program is. And that's a couple of weeks. And then from that, we'll go to concept design, which is minimum month, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 3 months if the client takes a while to make decisions or if they change their mind. And usually by the end of concept, you have a package where the project's pretty well designed and it's designed enough to go to the government and get an entitlement and get approvals to build. Then from that, we go to schematic design. And for a project of that same size, I'd say at a minimum, schematic design is about 2 months. Usually it's about 3 to 4. And then once SD is over, then we do DD, which is detailed design, which usually runs about 4 to 6 months. And then at the end of DD, if everything gets approved, there's usually about 2 weeks for us to do what we call a tender pack, which is where we'll take all the work we have done, all the documents, the drawings, and get all the specifications and put it into a tender pack that can then be bid. And then it'll go to bid. Contractors will be brought in, and then it goes to supervision. And then usually it's about 3 to 4 years to build it.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for that detailed, lineup of what happens in a firm. Generally happen. But another question coming to this process that you've shared is, as an institution or any architecture student or a design student, how much of design detailing do you think is required for him to be, in order to be prepared? Because you've shared stages where there's a schematic, there is a concept, there is a detailing. How much do you think a student should work on, and how much of detailing do you think a student should do as a student where he's understanding the field of architecture?
Well, I think it depends on the student, but I would say any good architect should understand how buildings come together. That doesn't mean you have to be an expert on everything, but you should be able to look at a wall or look at a corner of a building and understand what's inside of it. Everybody can look at what you can touch and feel, but a good architect should understand what's behind the dress. You need to understand what's inside, where the column might be, how the any cladding is connected, where the caulk joints might be, where a potential leak might be. I'm not saying you have to be a detail expert, but you should at least understand how buildings come together, because you can't, how do you iterate it to a client if you don't have a basic understanding of these things?
No, I think you've put it together very nicely for us, to bring it. And coming to the last question, financial management is essential. How do you approach it? What advice would you give to young emerging architects? Because there is always a doubt that they have, even, all of us as practicing architects, whether we're putting too much, whether we're charging the right amount. How do you, or what is the advice that you would like to give the young architects about financial management?
You mean if you're a sole practitioner?
Yeah, as a sole practitioner, as young entrepreneurs who are running, a small firm, how do you think, how do you think we can charge, or how do you think we should, handle the finances? Because that isn't covered as part of the academic curriculum, and we really have less idea about business development as a subject itself. So what would you give as an advice to young entrepreneurs who are sole practitioners?
It's a formula. The first question is, how much money do you want to take home? So whatever your take home is, annualized. Let's say I want to make X per year for myself, for my family. So that's a value. And then, you have all your overhead costs. So, the rent for your office, if you're in your house, then you don't need to worry about that. But then you sort of add up all of your business costs, and then you add 15% on that as a markup, and then you divide it by 12, and that's your monthly charge rate. And then you divide that by 160, and that's your hourly charge rate. And as long as you're getting compensated in a manner that supports your hourly rate, then everything else will work itself out at the end of the year.
So you would
Yeah,
like to
you also have to add in taxes, or it depends on where you are. And in different parts of the world, there's a different tax rate. So you have to sort of add what in the U.S. as an example, whatever take-home pay you want to make, you've got to add about 25 to 30% on top of that to cover the tax gap. So.
So you would like to say that how much I would like to charge depends on how I value myself and what is the price that I would like to keep on myself, along with my overheads and the other expenses.
Yeah. And then if you have other people, then it becomes a multiple of that. So if you have two people, then how much that person wants to make and how much you want to make, plus
But
the
let's
taxes.
say,
And then you can pick up a shared, the rent and those kinds of things. So it's not a 1-to-1 add. It's the number goes down based on the number of people you have in the group. So in other words, if you had a 100-person firm, that pro rata is lower than if you per person than if you had 5 people, because the 5 people have to cover, the rent and all of that other stuff. But anyway.
but let's say there's a project and I really like the project. I would really love to do the project, but the compensation isn't right enough, or I feel that it isn't right, but I would like to do it. So how do you think a young architect should take a decision? Is it passion, or is it going to be seen as an opportunity, or should I really do it? What do you think I should do?
I think it depends on what your vision is for your career and whether or not it supports that vision. And if it does, and there's some inherent value that goes beyond money, then it's probably worth pursuing. But if it's an average project and doesn't get you towards your goals, then maybe not. The other part of it too is who it's for. It might be a project that you do for somebody projects in the future, so maybe there's that to consider as well. But I think a lot of it depends on what the vision of your firm is, and what you want to do. I would say not selling, not being firm on your value is a risk, because once you go down that path, it's hard to build that back in. In other words, if you do a project for somebody and you do it at a low rate, they're going to expect that the next time, no matter what is said. So, be careful is what I would say.
Thank you. I think that was fantastic advice to end the entire session. So I think we've come to the end of the session, and I would like to definitely, give a heartwarming thank you to Daryl and the entire team of, Devlin, who actually put me through in touch with Daryl to be able to make the session possible. And I'm pretty sure that all the interactions we had, all the kind of answers that you gave for the questions that came through patiently would definitely enlighten the minds of these young entrepreneurs who would want to, be part of something, global level. And KEO has definitely given us something to look up to look forward to, in something that, where we can look up and how we can understand and develop. So the scale is always something that every architect would want to grow. Every architect would want to grow to a level, and KEO has been an inspiration to that level always. And you've now given us so many simple ways to look at things, from the way to handle finances and what you like and what to choose. I think the answers were very, in common man terms, it was very understandable, very relatable to what we're facing. And definitely, I think we have learned a lot through this interaction. I think I can speak for all the students, teachers, and architects who attended this FOA session. So thank you all for being a part of this fantastic space that we've created in FOA. And there is more to come, and we're going to be having more interesting architects like Daryl, who's going to be sharing their experiences with us through these intense interactions. Once again, thank you, Daryl, for your time, and a big thank you to KEO for making it, and showing us a path forward and what to look up to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck to you all. Have a good weekend.
Yes, you too. Thank you.